I will be giving third lecture, which will be March 1st. So make sure you join in for that. We're going to talk about some substrate work. But without further ado, and these are just quick 20-minute lectures. So we're not a 45-minute hour lecture like they used to be. So we wanted to pack more information in on different subjects. So we hope that you enjoy them and can come check them out on YouTube as well later. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Raj Singh with the LSU Ag Center. Raj is a plant pathologist working with nurseries, ornamentals, and really every type of horticulture out there. And today, Raj is going to talk to you about Phytophthora management in nurseries. So Raj, if you want to share your screen and take it away.
Can you all see my screen now?
Yes.
No? Yes? Can you hear me
Yep.
okay?
Yep, we can hear you and see you.
All right, perfect. Thank you for this opportunity to present this a short lecture on Phytophthora management. And good morning, everyone. Today's lecture, I'm going to focus mainly on container nursery, container plants, and mostly towards ornamental because it's a small, very short lecture. So I'll try to give you general ideas on how to manage Phytophthora in the nurseries. But if in future I give another opportunity to talk to you guys, then we can talk about, especially about container nurseries or ground nurseries or something like that. So, but today I'm going to focus on management of Phytophthora with reference to container nurseries of ornamental plants. There are some pathogen facts. I have heard over several years that when you read an article about Phytophthora, it says Phytophthora is a fungus. So if you reference to that article, if you use that article for your information, stop reading that article right then and there. Because Phytophthora is not a fungal organism. It is a fungal-like microorganism, okay? It's totally different from true fungi. The fungus you will see on the leaves, fungus you will see in the roots, so it's totally different. The reason I'm emphasizing on Phytophthora is because when it comes to management of Phytophthora, we have to manage it like a more kind of an algae management, okay, rather than a fungal management. And also the fungicides that we will use against this pathogen are different from what we'll use for true fungal microorganisms or true fungal diseases. So remember, it is a fungal-like microorganism. Unfortunately, it can cause symptoms through soil, root rot, crown rot, and also foliar pathogens. When I say foliar pathogen, that you can find the pathogen growing on the foliage, okay? But that host list is very small compared to your soil-borne pathogen. When the soil-borne nature comes in, that means that the pathogen can stay in the soil in the absence of the host. So even if you remove the symptomatic plants from the containers or from the potting soil, you still have the infection in that potting soil or also in your native soil. As I mentioned here, it produces foliar, root, and crown rot symptoms. Sometimes you will see the foliar symptoms, but the problem is in the roots. Poor drainage and soil compaction are the two predisposing conditions for this disease, for this root rot pathogen. Now, if you don't have those conditions, the pathogen can still cause symptoms or can still cause infection. But these two conditions, the poor drainage and soil compaction, they will stress out your plants. And when your plants are stressed out, they become highly susceptible to pathogen infection. It's just like us. When we are stressed out, we are more prone to all these infections. When we are living healthy life, then you might or might not get flu every year. Okay, so same thing with the plants. They're living organisms. So when they are stressed out because of poor drainage and soil compaction, that will lead to more infection. That means the pathogen doesn't have to work too hard to colonize the roots of the plant. But remember, even if you don't have those conditions present, in your containers or in your soils, there is still a chance that the pathogen can cause infection. Now, these pathogens, they are plant parasites, okay? And they has ability to cause a disease. That means they are living organism living off of another living organism, okay? Some are biotrophs, that means they need a living host to survive. Some are necrotrophs, that means they will feed on it, and they during that process, they will kill the host. We commonly call them water moles, and I'll show you the reason why we call them water moles, because they like free water, okay? Also, they produce these mobile zoospores. And the reason we call them zoospores is because they act like animals. They can swim on their own in free water, okay? They have these two flagella on their body. One is just to help them swim, and the other one is a chemosensory that will sense those root exudates from the stressed out plants. Some species have very wide host range, and some of them are very host specific. When I say host specific, that means it will only go to one family or maybe a couple of species, okay? When it's a wide host range, it can go to various host species and various host families, okay? This is why we call them water moles, and I think I should be able to play it. So so what you're seeing here, these are the, I'm going to keep it simple. These are the sprangiosspores. And inside those sprangiosspores, you can see how dark that matrix is, and some of them are empty, okay? These are actually the infection propagules that the pathogen will produce, and those propagules will produce these zoospores that will later on germinate and cause and start the infection process. So I want you to bring your attention to some of these dots that you see here, okay, and see what happens. It's not playing. Should play. Okay. So see, you can see there are things moving around, right? You can see all over the place, you have the things moving around. Those are the zoospores. Okay? That means they can move on their own. They can swim in water. So that makes it very difficult when we're talking about a soil-borne pathogen, and that has the mobility adaptation, that even if you remove a symptomatic plant, there is a huge probability that the plant next to it is already infected with the spores. You're not just seeing the symptoms, but it is already there. So this is one of the reasons when we are trying to manage Phytophthora, we always recommend that you at least remove the plants surrounding that infected plant. The soil-borne nature, this picture is like a self-telling story. You can see here, this is the oldest plant in the back. This is an azalea. Just wanted to, I'm talking about nurseries, but just wanted to give you an example of how the disease spread in the landscape, and also the similar situation in the nursery. When you have, this is like a healthy living plant, older living plant, and you can see here, this is a newer plant, and this is like almost dead. And then there are some plants in the back that are in the process of wilting and dying. So why this is a new plant? Because the plant that was there already died. So you took it out and you plant a new one. But by the time you planted a new one, the pathogen has already moved. That tells the soil-borne nature of this pathogen, okay? And so what's going to happen to this plant is going to die again because the pathogen is moving in all directions. And same thing is going to be this one. And I would, if my professional experience, this plant will die before this one start having infection. Why? Because this is a newly transplanted plant and it's going through that transplant shock, it's already stressed out, okay? So when it's already stressed out, the pathogen doesn't have to leave this space. Why move here to cause infection when you have free buffet being provided to you? You can stay here and cause infection and feed on it. This is what we see in the container nurseries. The reason I have this picture over here is I want to show you the foliar symptoms of this disease. And you will see the similar symptoms in the landscape as well. These are the Japanese yew. plants, but these are in the containers. And you can see there are branches that are still living, but then there are branches that are dying. So why is that? Why not all of the branches are dying? Because the pathogen is slowly going to move to the side where it's still healthy. Okay, so it's working on one side, but then it's going to move. If you don't take care of it, it's going to move. Now, I have heard from some of the nursery owners or growers is that, oh, I removed these symptomatic parts of the plant. Is that going to help? No. Remember, it is a root disease. So the pathogen is present here in the roots, not up here. This is the root and the crown rot disease. At the same time, this is a foliar blight on azaleas. Okay, this is also from a nursery. But in this case, the pathogen is not in the potting soil or not in the container. The pathogen is up here in the foliage. Okay, so in this case, management will differ from what you have in the root and crown rot disease, but it will be something similar when it comes to how you manage it. And I'll share those slides with you as well. This is very common here in Louisiana and Florida too. This is called leaf and crown rot. Okay, the name of the disease is kind of misleading because you start seeing the leaf rot. Okay, but the symptoms are caused because the crown is rotting in the soil profile. Okay, and in this case, if you have a plant like this and you're propagating from this plant, from a larger plant, and you're propagating some of the little bibs from it, there is a high probability that those whips are already infected. Okay, so this is one of the management practices. If you have something like this, it has to go. You can't use it as a propagating mother plant. When it comes to diagnosing the problem, it's very, very important to diagnose it before you start managing it. And here you can see this also came out of nursery. This is a boxwood. And you can see how the similar kind of symptoms where the sections are kind of dying and the plant is wilting. And if you look here, all the roots are rotting. It should not have root rot like that, but all the roots are rotting. And when you check those roots out, you can see some of the roots, they are kind of naked. The epidermis or the external layer is gone. And what I tell my stakeholders is that if you pick up some of the roots from here, okay, and then you just run those roots in your finger, the epidermis will come off. That is about 75% chances that you have Phytophthora root rot. Now, in some cases, if you have a pot bound like that, and you didn't raise it to the next container, that can also cause similar kind of root rotting. Okay, so just be sure that if it's just not the pot bound or the pathogen. In case of pot bound, you will see the symptoms all over the place, not just one section. Okay, that's how you can tell the difference between just a pot bound plant and a disease infected plant. Accurate identification is the key in this case. If you are unable to tell the difference between these two diseases, okay, then most probably you need to submit a sample to a lab, because in this picture you can see the symptoms on the top and the bottom, they are mimicking each other, very similar to each other, but the top is Phytophthora root rot and the bottom one is a boxwood dieback. Boxwood dieback, I think we had it for several, maybe 20, 30 years, and it was misdiagnosed because it will produce very similar symptoms to your Phytophthora root rot. Now, this is a true fungi. Phytophthora root rot is not true fungi, and I have several cases where the landscapers, they were managing this boxwood dieback as Phytophthora root rot. So, and because there are two different kinds set of diseases, the management is different, and they were just wasting their time and money. So right now I'm going to go over some of the disease management principles, and there are three main ones: exclusion, eradication, and management of the disease. Okay, and you are all professionals, and you are more experienced. You have more experience than me, but this is something that If we can put that into our management strategies, then there will be less headaches in the future. So exclusion means we are trying to prevent the pathogen moving into your nursery. That means if you stay healthy with the pathogen-free plants, you're going to stay healthy for rest of that. About 50 to 80%, you will have less diseases. Okay, prevent introduction of the pathogen. It's very, very important. And one of the main source of transmission of diseases is infected plant material. Depending upon the plant disease that we have, it may look very healthy to start with. By the time you put it in the landscape, the pathogen is ready to work on it and cause the symptoms. So when you buy plants, if you are buying plants from outside source, make sure you are buying them from reliable source. Check the plants when they arrive, check the plants if they are root and pod bound. Remember, in the beginning, I mentioned that this condition is same thing with like the soil compaction, because if they are root and pod bound, the water is going to sit there, the water is not going to move out, and because they're stressed out, they will be more susceptible to those plant pathogens. Quarantine. I know sometimes you don't have enough space, but if you are getting plants from outside, don't immediately put them with your existing plants in the blocks. Okay, you want to put them on a side and monitor them at least for a month or so. In my experience, some pathogens may produce symptoms within 14 to 21 days. Others may take longer. Okay, but at least for a month is a good time that you can monitor them. Now, when I say quarantine them or isolate them, that means you are still going to take care of them, not just like let them sit there, okay? But you're looking for any symptom development during that time. Clean equipment is very, very important, okay? Because remember I said it is a soil-borne pathogen. So if you are using shovels that have the soil from the existing crop, there is a chance that you can move that infected soil to the next potting mix and cause the infection. If you're propagating your own plants, make sure, excuse me, make sure that you're propagating from healthy mother plants, okay? If you have any kind of disease suspicion, don't take any liners from that plant. And that's true with not just with Phytophthora, but other plant diseases that we're dealing with. And one of the good example is boxwood dieback, because it is a systemic pathogen. It stays in the plant, and even if the leaves or the twigs look okay to go, you still can have the infection present in that. Eradication is stop pathogen establishment. So let's say you bring in some plants and they were infected. Now we are trying to stop them from establishing in your nursery. So the first step is you're going to scout the plants on a regular basis. And that is also true when you have in the quarantine period, okay? But even after that, once you see there are no symptom development, when you move them to your production blocks, make sure that you scout them on regular basis. When I say scout them on regular basis, it doesn't mean that you are out there every single day, maybe once a week or twice a week, depending upon how busy is your schedule. Or you can also train your crew members to look for those symptoms, because they are most of the time, most of the day, they are working in those production blocks. Accurate and timely diagnosis. It's very, very important. If you are unable to diagnose the problem, you need to have some specialist help in order to figure it out. And timely diagnosis, by that I mean is that it should be quick. It should not be like 2 months from now, I figured out what the disease is, okay? By the time, if you accurately identify, but it took you 3 weeks to find that problem, by the time the disease has a chance to spread to neighboring blocks. Removal of symptomatic plants and asymptomatic plants, depending upon the disease. In this case, because we know it is a soil-borne disease, irrigation water can move it. So even if you have the plants around the symptomatic plant are not infected, you may want to maybe isolate them for some time period, okay? That's a good strategy, because if you remove only the symptomatic plant, there's a chance that the other plants are already infected but not showing the symptom. They are going through their latent period. Removal of affected plant parts is not effective in this case because remember, it is a root disease. So even if you cut out the symptomatic twigs or anything like that, the disease is going to come back. And when you do that, there is another chance that when you prune some of those affected twigs, it is going to stress out. Even if it's dead, it's going to stress out, and there is a higher chance that the pathogen will cause an infection. Proper disposal of disease plant materials. Okay, if you can burn the plant material, if burning is allowed, if you can burn it, that's fine. If you don't have that, then try to dispose the affected plant material away from your nursery and make sure that it's not upslope of the nursery. Why? Because if it's on the higher side, there is a chance that when it rains, the water will come in contact with those disposed potting mix and the plant material and can bring those propagules with it back to your production blocks. Protection, disease management. I didn't put disease control there. The word control is now obsolete because doesn't matter in this type of disease. It's very difficult to eradicate it when it is established. So you can manage it to a point where it's not causing economic damage. Chemical barriers, like the fungicides you're going to use. If you use them, if you rely heavily on chemicals and you are not taking care of the cultural practices that promote the infection by the pathogen, then the chemicals are very less effective. Okay, but if you are improving the health of that plant and then using chemical and to help out the infection or prevent the infection, then you will see that the plant is living healthier by not just based on the chemical barrier. Physical, spatial, or temporal barriers. This is kind of like a temporal is time-based. If you're bringing in new plants, make sure you can quarantine them, separate them. Now, in this case, spatial is more kind of like if you're using an overhead irrigation and the water is splashing from your native soil back into the pots, that means that you want to separate them out. Why? Because if you have them closed, there is a chance that from the infected plant container, the dirt can splash out with the irrigation water or with the sprinkler head, and then it can move back into your containers. When it comes to fungicides, preventative versus curative, there are very little number of fungicides that have any curative action, but these two terms are taken, I think, misleading, to use that word, because preventative and versus curative. Preventative is the amount of the fungicide and the time of the time period of the fungicide. So if you look at any fungicide label, you will see 2 to 4 fluid ounces at 10 to 14 days intervals. So your preventative is 2 fluid ounces at 14 days interval. Curative is 4 fluid ounces at 10 days interval. So curative is when you have heavy disease pressure. Preventative, you knew that you have the disease last year and you have that on a chemical regime that you want to use it as a preventative. So lower dose, extra time for preventative, higher dose, less time for curative. But again, if you use those the cultural practices that will modify the environment, the microclimate around that plant, and that will help the plant and reduce the stress to the plant, then you have higher chances of have a successful disease management. These are some of the fungicides that are listed, especially for the nurseries, especially for the container nurseries. Some of them can be used in the landscape and the greenhouse nurseries as well. But in this case, I mentioned them because these are some of the most effective ones that we have registered here in Louisiana for container nurseries. I listed these frag codes here. This is very important because nowadays you will see a lot of chemical combinations, your AI, which is the active ingredient that is present in the trade name. So these are all trade names. You know about that. You know about the active ingredients. But the reason I put these frag codes here is that you see, when we are trying to manage fungicide resistance, the goal or the idea here is not to rotate your fungicide with the same active ingredient, right? So, but nowadays we have seen a lot of these active ingredient combinations. So in this case, if I recommend, or if you're using Arvego and Mycora, that means you have one active ingredient that is same in both these fungicides, okay? So there is a higher chance that that pathogen may become resistant to that frag code. Okay, the frag code is the mode of action. So one of these, so in this case, dimetfor and mendipromid has the same mode of action like this one. So if you are rotating these two fungicide, it's not a good idea to do that. Rotating Truban with Subdumax is a good idea. Okay, and you should, in case of your nurseries, you should have at least 2 or 3 of these different chemistries on hand when it comes to Phytophthora. Finally, some of the cultural practices that help maintain or prevent it from happening in the nurseries is obviously when you have those plants that are symptomatic, you want to remove them. And same with the potting mix. Again, this is one of those diseases which can stay in the soil in the potting mix. Even if you discard it and try to reuse it, it's going to be still there. Depending on the plant species, it can survive in the soil in the absence of the host from like 4 to 10 years. Okay, so but again, just to avoid that recontamination, it should be avoided using the old potting mix with the symptomatic plants. If you can't use new containers, but there is that you can use older containers, make sure you disinfect them. Make sure you properly wash them. There is no debris, plant debris or soil debris in that pot. And you can use any different kind of disinfectant. You can use quaternary ammonia, xylitol. You can use bleach. You can use other disinfectant, pine sol. If you can do the steam disinfestation, if you have that capacity to do it, that's the best thing to do. Make sure you store your potting mix off of your native soil, because soil, it is a soil-borne pathogen and it can move within the soil profile. So if you have that potting mix stored on the native soil, there is a higher chance that that can get contaminated as well. And once it's contaminated, it's going to spread out in those containers and cause infection. Irrigation water, if you collecting the water, if you're retaining the water in a pond and the water is coming from all your production blocks, make sure your potting mix is not stored in the same direction. Make sure it's stored away from that irrigation water flow, because why? The pathogen it is a water mole, remember? It can swim, the spores can swim on their own in the water. Finally, any kind of barrier that you can use between the containers and the native soil. Again, the idea here is to stop the soil particles splashing into the containers, okay? And if you have heavy soils underneath and the water is not moving, that will also give it some space that is not coming in contact directly with that water. I like drip irrigation, but sometimes you don't have that capacity, or it's just too much because of the sheer size of the nursery. Overhead sprinkler irrigation is okay, but if you try to do it, have the gravel barrier and do it early in the morning, okay? As early as you can, because you want them to be like settled down and there is no water going up in the evening hours. Irrigation water treatment, if you're using pond water for irrigation, we have some evidence that pathogen can stay in the water too for several weeks. So if you are recirculating that water into your production system, that means you can also re-inoculate some of your disease-free blocks as well. And there are several systems out there that you can permanently install, or you can use chemicals to treat those ponds in order to prevent it from recirculating in the water. This is just a common sense, well-drained nursery areas and substrate. Dr. Fields is doing a great job on having those substrate that will retain adequate amount of moisture rather than those containers that are filled with heavy potting mix and retain too much moisture. Okay, same thing with the nursery area, that you don't want having any standing water in those. Remember, it is a water mold and it can survive in those water pockets. This is kind of like an addition to what you are already doing. So once the crop is finished or done with that crop, in the time between, use that time to disinfect that ground. Okay, especially when you have those benches, bench spaces, because again, the pathogen can stay on those contaminated surfaces. So cleaning that with any kind of a disinfectant will help you reduce infection that will carry to your next crop. Proper sanitation practices while propagating new plants. I have seen a few folks who have the potting mix next to it, and especially in case of these liriope or mondo grass, they're cutting there, the crew is cutting it there, and it's just so contaminated that all your new whips are going to show the symptom in a couple of weeks. So proper sanitation practices during that time of propagating process is very, very important. Remember, if you start healthy, you're going to stay healthy for a longer time. With that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Raj. Does anyone have any questions for Dr. Singh?
I know I went over it real quickly because I was told that you have only 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But maybe we can make it a little longer next time, or maybe we have like a face-to-face meeting and then we can discuss in more detail.
We'll have to have a part 2 later on.
Yeah. But you have my email address. Use it. That's for you all. Okay. If you call my cell number, make sure if I don't pick up, leave a message with your name on it. Okay. I have several calls where I don't pick it up, and then I got like, why do you pick my phone? That's a. But you can call on my cell number as well.
Excellent.
Thank
Well, if
you.
there are no other questions, thank you so much. And this will conclude our Margie Jenkins lecture series for February.
And we'll see you guys on March 1st from
Live.
Burton. Yeah. Okay. Thank you guys so much. If
Thank
you
you.
reach out if you need to. Thank you, Dr. Singh, and we will see you all soon.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.